Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of
Redacted.
With Grim. This is basically a podcast for me to talk about all my horror things with my dearest friend Grim and basically just annoy him with all of my horror knowledge. So, here we go. Welcome, Grim.
Thank you. It's a joy to be here.
I'm glad. I'm really excited to just be able to be a huge dork and talk about all this horror stuff that I like and force you to listen to it.
Well, it's interesting to me because, I don't watch a lot of horror stuff because I'm a big scaredy cat like that. So
hmm Well,
this
I mean, I
gives
am
me
too.
all the information I need to know without actually having to endure the human centipede and stuff like that. It's
Oh, I
wonderful.
can't wait until we get into that one because I love talking about the human centipede. I'll talk to anybody about it for hours unsolicited. But anyway, that's not what we're doing today on the first episode. But
What is
I promise we'll get there.
what is our first episode about?
All right. So for the first one, I wanted to do a little something called book versus movie, which is a segment in which just like it implies, I will read a book that they have turned into a movie. And basically we'll just compare and I'll kind of give my thoughts and opinions on what I think and then of course gauge your reaction as well because well if it's something you haven't seen. Um and yeah, I just think it'll be really fun and then people can give their thoughts on it also and just be a fun little conversation.
All right, I'm ready to go if you are.
All right, cool. This first one we're going to talk about is one of my favorite movies. There was a point where I had this movie on at the house just as background noise for like a month straight, which is American Psycho. And have you ever seen American Psycho?
No, I have not.
Yeah, it's pretty
Who
good.
stars in it?
American Psycho, it has Christian Bale. Actually, it has Jared Leto in it, which is weird because, well, I didn't think Jared Leto started acting until like way later, but I was very wrong. And then when I ended up rewatching it, I was like, is that fucking Jared Leto? But yeah, it's got Jared Leto, it's got Willem Dafoe, it's got Reese Witherspoon, and probably some other people I'm forgetting, but those are like the main ones that I
Oh,
remember.
so it's not Matthew McConaughey.
No, no.
Okay, I don't watch Matthew McConaughey.
No, but Christian Bale did a really good job. I think he plays it really good. I think I actually read that because basically this went through when they were making it to a movie, it went through several people that were going to direct it or write the screenplay for it or star in it. And one of the people that apparently was really interested in starring in it was I think it was Tom Cruise, but let me double check myself real quick.
I just can't see him being uh, a, a psychopathic, convincing psychopath. Of
Well, I
course, I
can't
haven't met him
either.
in real life either.
No, but I'm trying to think if because it could have been that it was Brad Pitt, but I want to say that it was okay, it said that Brad Pitt was considered for it, but I thought it was funny because Christian Bale's actually said that because he based his character on an interview he watched with Tom Cruise who was basically just talking without anything behind his eyes. You know what I mean? Like he kind of just had this
Dead inside
deadness.
look.
Yeah, hit this deadness in his eyes, even though he was talking about whatever. So I thought it would be really funny if Tom Cruise had wanted to play him, and then he ends up basing his character on Tom Cruise.
That is funny.
Yeah, but I don't see that here. But so I probably just misread. But anyway, that's not important. So as I
Okay,
have.
you
Hmm?
read the book first, right?
No, I watched the movie, and I just wanted the book for a long time,
Mhm.
and I finally got my hands on it and read it because, as you know, I don't get a lot of time to read. So it's been It's been probably almost a year since I've read it, but I kind of kept notes as I was reading it because at that point I was watching American Psycho, like I said, on repeat. So I was just kind of comparing as I went, which gave me the idea for this because I was
Excellent.
like, man, it's crazy to see the difference and how they translated it to film, you know?
Yeah, who's the author of the book?
It came out in 1991 and it was written by Bret Easton Ellis.
Okay.
And I think he actually tried to write the screenplay for the first director, and so he himself was trying to translate it to be a movie. Uh, but apparently, he has said that he doesn't really think it translates to film well. Even now, he said he thinks the film is fine, um, but that he thinks that the book is unadaptable because it's about consciousness and you can't really shoot that sensibility, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they've tried in movies such as Joker and
Hmm.
that such, and yeah, they come across as just psychotic instead of like the deeper meaning of the psychosis.
Yeah. I mean, you could definitely tell. I mean, we'll get into it in just a second, but there's a lot in the book that's really wild. I mean, really wild. And that movie was already like condemned for how violent it is, you know? And if
Mhm.
they I mean, if anybody that's actually read the book, if they had put half the shit that's in the book in the movie, I mean, there's no way. There's no way they could. It would have been banned or it would have had a higher, you know, maturity rating or they just couldn't have done it. I mean, it gets pretty wild. It gets pretty wild. So what they did with the movie, I feel like it conveyed it as best it could. And I mean, I love the movie. Don't get me wrong. I actually think I like the movie more than I like the book, and I'll get into why. But I mean, like I said, I think they did a pretty good job with what they had to work with, and made a really good movie about a really fucked up dude.
Good. I can't wait to hear about it.
Yes, I'm very excited. So, all right. So since you've never seen the movie, I will
Mm.
give you kind of my rundown of it without using Google too much because I think I could pretty much tell you what the plot is. Without having to check. As much as I've watched it, I should hope so. So basically, American Psycho is about a really wealthy businessman who is Patrick Bateman, played by Christian Bale, who is also a serial killer. Um, the whole plot's basically just about his descent into madness, how you know he lives in this totally different world because he's so wealthy and privileged, and he's just kind of disconnected from reality from the position he's in, but also disconnected from reality because he's a psychopath. You know what I mean?
Right. So he's truly a psychopath, or it was just a not a like a release for frustrations that he had. Right. He's truly a psycho.
Yeah, I mean it is kind of both in a way, but I mean he opens up the movie, and I think the book doesn't open up the same way. I don't believe. I think the book just let me double check. Because the movie opens up with him, you know, going through his little routine and all this stuff, and basically talking about how he knows he's crazy, how he's not normal, how he doesn't really have anything going on besides this persona he's created for himself. Um, so I mean, he's pretty self-aware of it, you know, and he talks about it the whole time, which makes it so interesting. Like he pretty much knows that he's messed up and why he's messed up. He just does. He just does things, you know.
Okay.
Um, that's what makes him such an interesting character because he is so self-aware, but at the same time, it's like he thinks he's self-aware and he is to a degree, but he's also, you know, just really out there. And we as an audience kind of get to see that, but we see it through his point of view, but even sometimes you're like, wow, he's saying this thing like he knows what's going on, but there might be something else going on, you know?
Right. So he's like uh do you think he's unsatisfied with his life as a high-end broker type guy, or what does he do for a living again?
He's like a stockbroker, I think.
Mm.
Let me check.
But the film don't really have a lot of that in it, or does it?
Well, it does. I mean, basically. Oh, let me find this real quick. What does Patrick Bateman do for a living? He works. See, the company he works for is called Pearson Pierce,
Mm-hmm.
which is murders. He actually makes a joke about this. I forgot. He makes somebody ask what he does, and he says murders and executions instead of mergers and acquisitions, whatever that word is. Which is it's the movie's full of it. Like, and the book is too. But like somebody will ask him something, or he'll say something like really out of pocket and crazy, and then they'll be like, "What was that?" And then he'll say something totally normal. So it's very ambiguous, and there's like a whole debate about whether the stuff that's happening is actually happening, because like, did he really say that out loud, or is that what he thought about saying or wanted to say but didn't actually say it? So
Oh,
it's cool how they do it. It's
that's
really
very.
cool.
That is.
But I mean, the whole situation is that he's so rich, and basically it implies at this job. I think in the book it implies it too, but definitely in the movie, says that his father like also works there and is pretty high up, so he may have just gotten in through connections rather than being good at his job, I assume, because
Mm.
most of the time he's not actually doing. You never see him doing any work. The whole thing is about them going to dinner or getting the latest, stereo system, or, watching the latest videos or whatever. Like, you never actually see him do any work.
Oh wow. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
And it
I
was the
mean,
same in the book.
yeah, the book, see, the book can kind of get, I don't want to say boring, but um, I kind of like how they space it out in the movie, because he's constantly like, whenever he gets dressed or he goes and interacts with somebody, he every single time he mentions what he's wearing and what they're wearing. Like, I'm talking the brand, like shit like that.
Ooh.
So it's very much about the look, what they're drinking, what specific brand of high-end water they're drinking. You know what I mean? It's all about the branding to show how high class, quote unquote high class, this world that he lives in is.
Oh, so it's like a kind of like a socioeconomic type bubble.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, got
Absolutely. I'm trying to find here, just to find a quote in here in the book so I can tell you what I'm talking about, because there is a lot of description of clothing in the book, like a lot, a lot.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
So it
maybe
was
we should.
important to him.
Oh yeah, like I said, this persona he's crafted for himself is basically all based on how other people perceives him, which I guess is kind of a statement as to the whole overtone of the book with him being a psycho and all. But it's all about the look, what he looks like, what people think of him, that they think highly of him, that they know he's intelligent, that they know he's wealthy. It's all about the look. It's
And
all
he's
about the
and
look.
he's judgy about other people and their stuff as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So he's kind of a dick.
Oh, he's a huge dick. I
All
mean,
right.
even just him being like normal, trying to be his normal self around people, he's a complete asshole. But so is everybody else he hangs around, because they're all in this
Bubble.
same world.
Wow.
I mean, it's a big like, how do I put it? It's like it's a big just shit on consumerism as a whole and what it does to people, and
Uh,
getting to the top and then realizing, well, what the fuck do I do now? And I mean, the guy that wrote it, Brett Ellis, he basically wrote it when he was in a similar position, like he was in, not like a murderer, I
right.
assume, but like,
Maybe.
having a good job, being, in the upper class, and just being like, this is supposed to make me feel better about myself, but I'm feeling more and more like shit about myself at this point.
Oh. So it was like a coping mechanism for what was really going on inside their heads.
Yeah, it seems so. Like I said, I assume he's not actually a murderer, but I get it. I mean, it's like they say, you get to the top, and where do you go from there? You know,
Right. There has to
you're
be
never
other.
satisfied with what you have.
This is interesting. Making me want to watch it.
Oh, we should definitely watch it together. We should do an episode where like we start an intro and then we watch it and then you give your thoughts on it because I mean that's the whole reason I started this because I want to have conversations about horror movies and stuff.
Count me in. This has been fun.
So just to give you an example, this is from one of the chapters in the book, just randomly that I found. This chapter is called Harry's, which is one of the restaurants or the bars they go to a lot. Um, Lots of names of restaurants and bars that they frequent. Also, he's walking down the street with his friend Timothy,
Hmm.
and it says, "Quote: He's wearing a linen suit by Canali Milano, a cotton shirt, Ike Bayar, a silk tie by Bill Blass, and cap-toed leather lace-ups from Brooks Brothers. I'm wearing a lightweight linen suit with pleated trousers, a cotton shirt, a dotted silk tie, all by Valentino Couture, and perforated cap-toe leather shoes by Alan Edmonds." Unquote. So there's a lot of that. A lot.
Wow. Okay, and they effectively portrayed that in the movie. Then.
Oh yeah, in the movie he just doesn't do it as much because it's like I said, anytime he
Right.
interacts with anybody or if he's talking about himself, he always makes a point to say what they're wearing. I mean, he does it throughout the movie, but I'm talking like in the book. I kind of every time he started describing stuff, it's like my eyes just glazed over for a minute because I'm like, oh god, he's describing clothes again. But it works. I mean, it works, and it just gives a really good understanding of his character and what he cares about because it's always about that.
Yeah, it's part of his part of the character.
Mhm. But, like, yeah, we should definitely watch the movie because I wanna know what you think. It's a classic. You mentioned earlier that when you look it up, it says it's a dark comedy, and I mean, it is. It's a dark comedy, and I think, my favorite kind of horror movies are the ones that are, like, either have humor in them, some kinda dark humor going on, like, that's why I like Scream so much because it's, like, there's, like, a weird, twisted funniness going on, whether I mean, usually it's intentional, but I like it when it's kind of subtle, but I don't know. We'll get into that at a different time.
Okay.
So there is one point I want to, well, one point, a couple of chapters that I specifically remember reading and wanted to talk about because they just shocked me.
Hmm.
And I mean, for me, the biggest takeaway is, and I mentioned this earlier, Patrick Bateman is way more fucked up in the book than he is in the movie. At least it's more laid out, I guess you could say. And to me, there's a couple, but this one specifically, I remember making notes about in the book because it just goes from 0 to 100 so quick, and it's so descriptive that I'm like, Jesus Christ, what just happened?
All right.
In
So, I
this,
mean, yeah, can you tell me about the first time you know he's a psychopath?
oh, you know it from the very beginning. I mean, give me a
Oh.
second, and I'll
Hmm.
see if I can find out. Can I just say, as I'm looking through the book, I don't remember if I read the introduction to the book or not, but I was kind of skimming it, and it says, quote, "But there is little to be gained in trying to analyze the violent scenes in the book. To do so is far more pathological than the scenes themselves, which function solely in order to show the barbaric legacy of the consumerist slash imperialist world we live in, the true thematic concern of the novel, by illustrating their divergence from Bateman's everyday life." Unquote.
Oh, okay. So, okay, that makes sense. That he just
Indeed.
diverges and removes himself from reality or
Hmm.
his reality and does what he does
Hmm.
as kind of like a fix.
Right. All right, so scanning through, I couldn't find exactly what I was looking for, but basically, it does say when I looked it up because I was trying to find where it was that you don't actually it doesn't really do anything violent per se at first, but it is pretty early on, and this is just what I'm reading as I Google it, and I can't figure out where it is in the book, but I remember what it's talking about. But relatively early on, he describes. I don't think he describes it out loud. Well, maybe not. Anyway, he describes torturing and killing a homeless man with a knife while walking through the city. And then you're kind of like, I'm sorry.
Ooh.
Excuse me. And I mean, that happens a lot. He really hates homeless people. He kind of hates everybody, but like he
So,
makes it very clear that they're of particular disgust to him.
so he is on the very, very tip top of societal ladder, and he views homeless people as the very, very bottom rung.
Yes, exactly. And this one really disturbing chapter I'm going to talk about actually kind of has a tie into that because I mean, he'll like mess with the homeless people and stuff, you know, like pretend to give them $1 or what have you, just really shitty stuff like that. And in this chapter I'm going to talk about, he's he's walking down the street with this old girlfriend of his that has really kind of messed him up, and I'll get into that in a second. But he actually gives a homeless person $1, and it specifically says, I hand a homeless man $1 just to impress her. So it's like it kind of just tells how much of an influence or a hold or like a hold that this person has over him, because otherwise he really doesn't give a fuck. I mean, when he's around his other shitty friends, he doesn't care. But with this particular woman it's kind of like a Ted Bundy situation. This woman that was, you know, very pretty, very intelligent, all this stuff that he had dated while he was in school, in college, had dumped him and had left this lasting impression to where it just makes him like a nervous wreck, and he doesn't really know what to do or how to act. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's wild. But while we're on the topic, I'm going to tell you about this crazy chapter. And this is like, this is, you know, little, this is not even a little, this is very disturbing. I will try to describe it in a way that we don't get banned. But just know, for anybody listening, that it's very, I mean, the whole book you know, needs like a disturbing content warning. So this is no different. I mean, we're talking about horror movies and we're talking about American Psycho, but still, I'm going to give fair warning.
All
Okay,
right.
so
That's good.
yes, this chapter is called Lunch with Bethany. Very, very nice name. Oh, what a chapter this was. Like I said, I mean, there's stuff throughout that got me like, Jesus Christ, this is rough. But, you know, I was expecting it. But for some reason, this chapter really stuck with me. So Bethany is the girl I was talking about, his old flame. He's recently ran into her again on the street. I guess she's back in town. She calls him up, wants to go to dinner, and he just is very, very nervous about it. I mean, he's a nervous kind of person sometimes. Sometimes his, you know, tendencies make him have anxiety, and he's got a whole bunch of stuff going on. But this woman in particular really gets him going, makes him very nervous. Like I said, it's very Ted Bundy-esque, where he had this woman and she was perfect, and you know, in his, I guess what he would consider his heyday, he was with her and she dumped him. So he's kind of held on to that forever, right?
Right.
Yeah, so they go to dinner. He's really self-conscious. He's panicked the whole time. He's acting pretty ridiculous. I mean, just saying shit because he doesn't know what to say, being weird, being like, "How's my hair?" Like he's a nervous wreck, and it's very apparent. He's describing how he's a nervous wreck. And you know, they start kind of drinking a little bit and whatever, and they're talking and chatting and blah blah blah. And the whole time he's kind of, I mean, he's nervous, but he's also kind of like, well, why would she have called me up here unless she wanted to see me again, unless she wanted to sleep with me again, and blah blah blah. Now she's gonna see how successful and stuff I am, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
And there's a point when he comes in, he's like, he thinks to himself specifically, man, I hope she's not with, I believe his name is Robert Hall. Hope she didn't get with that douchebag Robert Hall or that tool Robert Hall or whatever. So anyway, later on, she mentions that she has a boyfriend, which kind of sends Patrick over the edge. He's, you know, kind of like, why the fuck did she invite me here? And starts getting even more in his own mind, and, well, outwardly too, I guess. He starts getting more animated, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they kind of continue talking, and he's obviously like pissed. And at this point, she's also kind of being scandalous because she keeps saying, "Oh, I shouldn't have had this wine. I shouldn't have had this Chardonnay. Blah blah blah. I'm a little tipsy and all this stuff." So it's like she's not exactly. Don't want to say innocent, but I mean, she's kind of playing it up too. But obviously, she doesn't deserve what happens to her. But you get what I'm saying.
So at one point, all the people that he judges and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
That he cares about their opinion, and that's why he dresses like he does. He
Mm-hmm.
The only person opinion he really cared about was hers.
Yeah, I mean, she had a
On a non,
special
yeah,
hold on him.
on a non socio, like economic way, or a non, like he didn't he cared, he wanted to impress people, but he didn't really give a damn what they thought except
Mhm.
her.
Yeah,
It was
and
all
I'm
shallow.
wondering, yeah, I can't remember exactly when it says he started killing in the book or how long he's been doing it. I know it does. I just can't remember. Um, actually. Well, according to this, it just says Patrick Bateman's killing spree begins sometime during the late 1980s, and basically what I'm saying is it takes place in like the late 80s and the 90s, I believe. And I'm wondering if it's not because this was a relationship that he had maybe before he became so unhinged that he started murdering people. And maybe it was a time when he was a little more stable. I don't know. It doesn't really go into it, but I don't know. He's got special ties to this woman in his weird, messed up brain that's more than just, I dated this girl. You know what I mean?
Okay, so taking that he did something horrible to her.
Oh yes, can't wait. And I just want to reiterate, I am in no way saying that she was like coercing him, and I'm not blaming the woman for what happened. I want to make that
Right.
abundantly clear.
Right, but
I'm
in the realm of the fantasy that this takes place in,
I'm just
uh,
saying it
the
makes it.
character kind of
Yeah, I'm just saying like it. She calls him there, and she does say I have a boyfriend, and I might end up marrying him and all this stuff. But she also makes it a point to kind of be flirty with him and stuff, and whatever. Maybe she wanted to sleep with him, maybe she didn't. It's not really relevant. I'm not
okay.
saying that it's the woman's fault that this happened.
Right, you're not, and that's understood. Intelligent people say, well, he had every right to be mad, but he didn't have a right to take it to that extreme. Is
Yeah,
that
I
fair?
guess. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could say that's fair. I just don't want anybody to think that I would ever blame a woman for anything like this
Of course
happening. I
not.
mean, this is extreme, but you know what I'm saying. But so here we go. So anyway, they leave this restaurant and they're basically walking down the street, and he's trying and trying to convince her to come back to his place. And he's like, "Oh, I've got this new tea set or this new, dinnerware set I want to show you and all this stuff." And she's kind of being like, "No, Patrick, I have to get back to the office, and I would love to, but I, get there," just kind of bantering back and forth. Well, long story short, she is convinced to come back to his place. And he pretty much wastes zero time in the situation that's about to happen. Just a grotesque amount of torture takes place,
Oh my God.
including nailing her hands and fingers to wooden boards, macing her in the face repeatedly, chewing off
Oh,
her fingers till the bone is exposed, among other
Jesus.
things. Among other things. Um, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm just laughing
Right.
because I
My
watch these movies
reaction.
all the time, and your
Right.
reaction is great. Um, so then he begins to film the rest of the horror that follows. Because he does that several times. I mean, he does that in the movie too. Um, sort of. But the highlight of all this is being well, it's just in poor taste, shall we say.
Right.
Involves her face and
Oh.
some some sexual activity that's maybe not
Oh.
very cool. It's pretty bad. It's pretty rough chapter. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it really shows. I mean, I would say it really shows how unhinged he is, but he does a lot of other unhinged shit that shows you. I mean, there's a chapter called "Cooking and Eating a Girl." There's a chapter called "Taking an Uzi to the Gym." Like, shit gets real unhinged, but that one in particular, like I said, it stuck out to me because of the relationship that they had, how high of a regard he held this woman, and then, he's so nervous but also like excited to see her again, but then when immediately it doesn't go his way and he gets her back to his tortured cave of a house, it
Mhm.
just it just takes off from there and just doesn't stop, and it's just like so rough and
Oh, I
so
feel so
violent.
bad
Oh, it's
for.
awful. But you got to think, it's like people already think that this movie is, I mean, not think it is, but this movie got in trouble, shall we say, for being so violent, the violence towards women, there's some sex stuff in the movie, but not like that. Imagine if they had tried to put shit like that in the movie, it would be banned. It
Oh,
would not have worked.
okay, so that did not come across in the movie.
No.
He didn't do the book stuff. He did some of it, of course,
Mhm.
but not the this super disturbing shit.
No, the level of violence and disturbing stuff that he does is way more laid out in the book. I get it. You can't really show that stuff in a movie. I mean, it's cool, like, okay, you take Terrifier, right? Which I can't wait to do an episode on, but
Mm,
it does violence really well and in a way that's almost comical because it's so over the top. But in a
mhm.
movie like this, it's like you couldn't. I mean, I guess you could, but you couldn't do a
You'd
lot
be
of the
asking
shit.
for it.
Exactly. Especially not when this movie was made. It came out in 2000, I think. And, you know, it's just, I mean, I wouldn't personally, if they did some of the shit in the book, I wouldn't want to see it anyway. I think they do a
Right,
good job of doing the violence and how messed up it. Some of the movie, they don't even. It's more just implied violence, and it still hits you the same way. You know what I mean? I don't want to spoil too much of the movie for you since we're planning on watching it.
right.
But like I said, there's violence for sure and some fucked up stuff, but some of it's just the women
Wait.
get pushed out and they're all battered and beaten up, and he didn't even show them doing anything, but you get it, and it's still really disturbing.
Okay, I get it. I
Hmm.
mean, that's a good thing that it didn't translate over.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm kind of glad about that. If they had, we'd be having a whole different conversation about it, I feel like.
Mhm.
But another chapter in the book that I have a kid, um, and it just made me. It's obviously having a kid and stuff fucks with your hormones, and they're never quite the same. They get totally rearranged and whatever. But especially having your own flesh and blood stuff to do with kids hits you different anyway.
It does,
Um,
honestly.
Back when I was in school, so to say, the thing was watching these crazy shocker videos of people getting decapitated and like basically the worst real quote unquote, some of it was real shit you could find on the internet, right?
Right.
And that's not to say that it didn't bother me then, but it's almost like I was better at having like a disconnect from it, I guess. I mean, it definitely messed me up, definitely not stuff that I don't want to say I was a kid, but maybe like a preteen, teenager shouldn't be looking at that stuff, but you kind of get desensitized and disconnected in a way. And then as I got older, especially after having a kid, it
Mhm.
just I don't know, makes it more real, more personal, I don't know. You know
It
what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does. It, triggers your maternal or paternal instincts,
Mhm.
that now you have the experience. It's like, okay, what if, it was my kid? You're putting even as an adult, that's one of my problems is I watch a movie and I'm like, "Well, it's a 25-year-old kid. What if that was my kid?" So
Exactly.
yeah, I get that.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know, maybe it's just an as you get older thing, or maybe it's just because whatever's wrong with my brain. But now it's like I'm like, what if that was somebody I cared about? What if that was my kid? What if that was me? I don't know. And I'm trying really hard to uh, watch horror movies not like that all the time because I still enjoy horror movies, but it's like, and I was talking to you about watching Terrifier 3, that there was some stuff in that I was like, man, am I too much of a wuss for things now? But it
It's
is
a
what it is.
it's a separation thing when you're watching it. You just have to remember, hey, this is my entertainment that I paid for to see, and I'm not going to let my life situation or whatever affect my ability to enjoy the movie, enjoy the story.
Yeah, that could be a whole other thing, like a whole other long conversation that maybe we'll talk about one day because I do think it's really interesting and there's just a lot of things to go with that. But the reason I brought it up and this chapter of the book, I don't want to say it almost made me stop reading it, but I definitely had to put it down for a minute after reading it. Um, because, well, I don't really want to go into it, but basically the chapter is called Killing a Kid at the Zoo.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just what it sounds like, and it's. I think it's towards the end of the book, and it's kind of just. It's like a weird point in the book because there's a point where he starts. I think there's actually a point near the end where he kind of stops killing for a little bit and is trying, or at least convincing himself that he's trying to be better ish.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he goes to the zoo and just kind of at a crime of circumstance, you could say, he ends up killing a little kid and it's like everything else, it's pretty descriptive, but I mean it's not as gruesome as like the other chapter I just talked about because he's in public, but it makes me really fucking sad even just thinking about it because of course automatically I'm thinking of my own kid and thinking about how the fictional parent felt, and it just the way that describes it, it's very disturbing. And I know the whole point of it's to be disturbing. I'm not giving him shit for writing
Exactly.
it because it's the whole point. But I'm talking about me personally. It gave me pause, and I'm like, I'm gonna finish this book, but I don't like stuff to do with kids, and it makes me so upset and so sad.
I get it. I really do. But eh, your ability to verbalize what you felt, went through, and thought during both reading the book and watching the movie is very
Hmm.
important because it's relatable to a lot of people out there.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people feel that way, and there's a lot of parents and stuff that like horror movies. I mean, I remember. I mean, my parents always liked horror movies and stuff, and maybe that's why I remember watching The Bride of Chucky, and this is not any rip on my parents, but I would watch my two favorite movies when I was like in kindergarten. I remember I was in kindergarten were The Bride of Chucky and The Crow, which
Hmm.
neither one of those I should have been watching at that time. I mean, they taught me well enough to know like don't imitate this stuff, don't repeat the stuff you hear, stuff like that. So I wasn't like becoming a psychopath because I was watching this stuff. Like The Bride of Chucky, I thought was hilarious. I thought Chucky was funny. That's why I liked him so much. And The Crow, I don't even remember really what was going on when I was watching it. I just remember really liking it and wanting to watch it all the time. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even though I didn't really get it. But point being, you know, just because you're an adult, a parent, doesn't mean you can't enjoy things. Sometimes you just kind of have to enjoy them in a different way or learn how to enjoy them in a different way or what have you.
Very much so.
I'm trying to find that chapter I was talking about because something interesting does happen um, in the chapter that I don't like. There's also something interesting in the book, which I like how they did in the movie, obviously, because it's a classic takeaway from it, which you'll see what I mean when we watch it, but I'm pretty sure I've made this reference around you before, is there's several chapters that literally just diverge from the story, and it's just an entire chapter of him talking about different bands and or like music he likes. Like there's a whole chapter about Whitney Houston. There's a whole chapter about Huey Lewis and the News. There's a whole chapter about Genesis.
That's
I
fucking great.
love it.
That is fucking great.
No, it's great because he just totally goes off on a tangent about this music that he likes and stuff. And it's got kind of nothing to do with anything, but at the same time it kind of
It's
does.
insight.
It's about his own psyche and shit, but it's really interesting and I'm just sitting here like how did we go from the most horrific shit that's ever happened to hey, this is what I think about Genesis albums.
Without missing a lick.
Exactly. Oh, here's the chapter. Okay, yeah. So later on in the book, there's a killing child at zoo chapter.
Mm.
And at this point, he's kind of he's basically nearing the edge of his downward spiral. He's, you know,
Right.
getting, I don't know, listless. He's getting restless. He's just not enjoying it, so to say. I don't know. Just to
I'm
quote the
being
beginning of
careful.
it. Well, it's not that he's not being careful. I
Mm.
mean, he's pretty much never careful and somehow never gets caught, which is
Oh,
also kind of a why people think, is this really happening or is it all in his head? Um, but the beginning of this chapter, to quote it, quote, "A string of days pass. During the nights I've been sleeping in 20-minute intervals. I feel aimless. Things look cloudy. My homicidal compulsion, which surfaces, leaves again, lies barely dormant during a quiet lunch at Alex Goes to Camp, where I have the lamb sausage salad with lobster and white beans sprayed with lime and foie gras vinegar." Oh, and then he goes on. Sorry, end quote. He goes on to describe what he's wearing again. But you see what I mean? Even in that, when he's talking about his homicidal tendencies, he has to discuss where he's eating, and what he's wearing.
that's okay. All right.
So,
That's great, though, man.
yeah, I'm trying to skim through this without actually reading this chapter because it makes me really sad. Um, but I think he goes on to say that, like, he didn't enjoy killing the kid because it was basically useless because it was a kid and they have no life that they've lived up to that point and blah, blah, blah. And he's just
Right.
kind of losing it. Well, losing it in a different way than the rest of the time he's losing it by killing people.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I don't want to spoil the ending for you at all, so I won't. But I will say the ending for the movie is different than the ending for the book. It's not different. The ending to the movie is in the book, but whereas the movie stops at that point, the book keeps going
Oh,
a little bit longer. And I think that the way that it ended at that part of the movie worked really well for it. Like, really, really well for it, and I really liked that. I mean, it's kind of the same basic, hey, this is kind of how it ends slash doesn't end. But I thought, especially the last line that they use in the movie to end it, just kind of wraps it up so good as a film. You know what I mean?
okay. Yeah, I mean, the last line in the movie, you're not going to spoil that, right?
I mean, I can
Or
if
is
you
it?
want, but I'd rather you just see it.
I'd rather just see it, but it's pretty cool. The book explains it, or is it self-explanatory?
It's self-explanatory. I mean, it still kind of leaves it ambiguous as to whether or not all this shit's really happening or not, but it's kind of like I believe I read a thing, excuse me, I believe I read a thing, it was some interview with Brett Ellis where his as far as I know, he says, it's kind of left up in the air whether or not all this shit's happening or not. And he says that I think another one of the reasons it doesn't work as a movie is because even if it turns out that it's all in his head, you've seen him kill people in the movie. So in your head, it's already kind of really happening, you know?
Yeah,
So I get that.
yeah, that's pretty deep. Is
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing's like a big metaphor, and I love getting into the meaning behind stuff, but I mean, sometimes I also just like watching the movie because I like slasher movies and I think it's interesting and cool. And I'm like, that's why I like them so much when they've got that kind of comedy in them because I love that mix. I love that mix of really messed up comedy and just over the top, like, I'm gonna throw this chainsaw down the stairs and it's gonna perfectly hit the girl when she gets down the stairs and I'm gonna laugh like a crazy person. It's great. I love it.
yeah, just remind me not to go downstairs first.
Well, don't try to run out after I've just killed your fellow prostitute upstairs and you just got
Fair
freaked
enough.
out and ran.
Fair enough.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, is it uh are there like separate things that you remember in the book or stand out in the book and the movie on a separate level for you? Like when you read a book, you have favorite parts of the book, and when you see a movie, you have favorite parts of the movie.
Right.
What are your favorite parts?
Well, like I said about the book, there's definitely chapters and definitely parts in it that are so crazy that I both like and hate it for that, like the crazy lunch with Bethany one, the chapter where he's talking about like cooking and eating a girl or whatever. In the book, it makes it seem like he's so much more, and I mean this in like a literal sense, like so much more disgusting because it's talking about how there's just like decaying bodies laying around and body parts and all this shit. And it
Jeez.
almost makes it seem like he never cleans them up or anything. And of course, in the movie, he's very, I don't want to say meticulous about killing, but, he makes it a point to clean up and make sure there's no evidence or whatever, what have you, if it's really happening or not. Because there are some stuff in the book that, sorry, in the movie that leads to maybe the idea that it's not really happening and that it's just in his head, and that actually kind of goes to their question because there's a few parts in the movie that I really like, and I guess it's kind of spoilers, so I won't tell you if you don't want me to.
That's
um,
fine.
but it's more like, there's one part where he's dragging a body. He lives in like this big apartment building, this big fancy apartment complex or whatever. And he's carrying a body down the stairs in a duffel bag. And you see him carrying the body in the duffel bag. And then he puts it in the trunk of his car. And then when he turns around, because somebody that knows him from work comes up to him, and you see the bag again, it's not a body bag or trash bag, it's an overnight bag. And the guy starts saying, "Oh my God, Patrick, where did you get that overnight bag?" So you're like, well, wait a minute.
Mhm.
Just like little things like that. Like when he says things like some crazy off the wall shit, and then you're like, huh? And then the person either ignores it completely or, said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. What'd you say?" And then he says something normal. Like, I love that shit because I'm like, what is happening?
Right. I
I'm
mean,
very much, and I think you're the same way, but I'm very much more of a visual person. I love
yeah.
books, love reading. Um, but I do like seeing things, and it helps me to comprehend them more, to see things. So, of course, I love, having it presented to me in front of me on a screen. And like I said, Christian Bale is such a good Patrick Bateman. I mean, he plays that role so well. And I just love watching him. I love watching him be that character. It's just so off the wall. But the book is very good also. Like I said, I love reading. It's just sometimes I like having a visual to compare it to. That's why I've started reading the book along with the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very good points. I mean, for me, when I was reading books, it was all about the mindscape, what your mind creates visually for the book,
Mhm.
right? It's like anything you read. You could read about a destination that you go to in your mind. It's way different,
Mhm.
extremely different. So, have you ever had the experience where because you read the book first and you watched the movie, it didn't match up with what was in your mind, but it was accurate to the book.
Mhm. Well,
So,
and that's the problem. I think most of the stuff has been because I watched a movie or a show, and that has made me want to look up and read the book that it's based on. So I
mhm.
would like to find maybe a book that I know is already made into something before I watch it because I would like to do that. I would like to see
I
what
would
I
love
have in
that.
my mind
That'd be a good.
beforehand.
That'd be a good podcast. Really.
Yeah, and we could definitely do that. I mean,
Mhm.
because even like, okay, say it's been a really long time since I've seen, like we were talking about this earlier, Misery.
Mhm.
It's been so long that I couldn't even tell you what happens in the whole movie other than a couple parts. So, and I've got the book that I haven't read yet. Um, but in my head already, I'm gonna be seeing Kathy Bates as the woman. You know what I mean? I've already got
Right.
somewhat of a scene going on in my head. So even then, I already have a predetermined thing that I'm seeing as I'm reading.
That would be actually fun to do.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree, and I would really like to do that. Maybe we could start a book club and like a book/movie club, and then we could both come into it and be like, "Oh my god, so this is the comparison."
A horror book club.
I mean, hey, maybe that's what we should start. Maybe that's what this should be.
Maybe that's what the world needs.
That is true. That would be really fun. Get your friends together and have like a little book club, and then once you guys all read the book and discuss over a few sessions or whatever, then come back and then you can have a little movie night.
That sounds perfect because it's a good way to exercise the mind, and winter's here, so we'll be indoors a lot. Uh, Good way to pass the time.
Agreed. Big agree. I guess we should wrap it up soon. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about this because I'm just really excited. It's our first episode. I'm actually talking, even though it really scares me.
It's
Um,
amazing. You've done
it's
very well.
Thank you.
I
It's
believe
hard not to get off topic though.
it is. I do that. I'm bad about that.
Well, me too, and that's fine. You know, it's just I try to keep the focus on one thing at a time, but I mean, that's what having a conversation's all about, divergence and just conversation.
So even with all the pros and cons, which I appreciate when someone goes into the pros and cons or the good, the bad of a book, you would highly recommend. If you have time, not recommend.
What, for the movie or for the book or for both?
Both.
The movie, I mean, and don't get me wrong, because I think there's like a sequel, maybe even more than one sequel to American Psycho. I haven't watched it and I don't plan to because I hate when they make sequels just for the sake of it. The
Mm.
movie is a classic. I would definitely super recommend the movie if you like horror movies, if you've never seen it. I mean, obviously, there's content in it that's disturbing, but such as with a horror movie, maybe American Psycho is notorious for being, you know, having basically a big conversation around it regarding violence towards women and all this stuff, and him being like a privileged white male. But I mean, that's like the whole point of the book. You know what I mean? The whole point of the movie. So I would highly recommend the movie. I love it. Like I said, it's one of my favorites. Used to watch it on repeat all the time in the background as like a comfort movie, quote unquote.
Mm.
But yeah, I do really enjoy the movie. It's kind of campy in some parts. Christian Bale's really good. Actually, I like Jared Leto in it too, even though I'm not the biggest fan of him, but he's like pretty young in it. And then Willem Dafoe's in it, which I had forgotten until I rewatched
Love.
it, and I was like, Willem Dafoe, what are you doing here?
I cannot wait to see him in was it Nosferatu?
Oh yeah, I can't wait for that. But as far as the book, yeah, I would recommend the book. Like I said, personally, just me being me, I like the movie better. I'm a very visual person. I do like the book. Like I said, there's stuff in it that if you do want to read it, like I said, I would recommend the book. I mean, I like the book. Um, just be aware that it's got a lot of disturbing content that is very full frontal. It doesn't dance around it in the book at all. Um, you know, and there's a lot of descriptions of what people are wearing and what's going on. So I don't know, and I was thinking that while I was reading it, that this might turn somebody off from reading it, but once you start getting into it, you're like, oh, when's he gonna talk about what they're wearing and what they're drinking? Because you're like, that's just who he is.
Well, I mean, I could always use a little fashion advice.
Yeah, well, I mean, you gotta admit the man dresses nice in his Valentino couture. Um, it is cool because I feel like while I was reading it, like in the movie's got more of a like I said, it starts out with him. You always know he's crazy. It's not like a shock. Like the whole movie is about his perspective of him, but it kind of goes into a downward spiral, a consistent downward spiral. You know what I'm saying? Um, but I felt like in the book he was a lot more. There were a lot more like moments in between of him kind of being, doing other things, and then there'd be moments of him spiraling out of control, him having anxiety attacks, his general mental instability, you know, just going on randomly, and then it'd be kind of back to like a calmness for a little bit.
Okay. That
He's just all over the place in the book. He's just all over the fucking place.
Have you ever seen the movie 24-Hour Photo with Robin Williams
I
as
have
a
not.
psychopath? We will watch that one. We need to
I,
mark that as one.
I feel like I just had heard about that somewhere, and I was really interested in it. They were talking about it on something, and I was really interested in watching it.
Cool.
Put it on
There'll
the
be a
list.
Discord. Yeah, we got plenty of plenty of material for the podcast, I'm
How
sure.
about this? How about this? We'll make a new channel called Movies to Watch.
Right.
Movies to watch. And then you put in there whatever the hell you just said.
24-hour photo. Got it. Perfect. I think this has been a pretty good first podcast.
Me too, if I could figure out how to get back to the chat. Okay, here we go. Well, any final thoughts on what I have explained about American Psycho? Any final feelings?
Well, it's kind of like watching a trailer, the way you described it, which is more in depth, and it gives me insight whether it's something that I can tolerate watching without raging out,
Mm-hmm.
right? And finish. And I think I can because, like you said, the book was way more graphic and went into more detail, whereas the movie is stuck at under 2 hours to convey all that from the book. So, yeah, I think I'll give it a watch with you.
I can't wait. And of course, I'm very excited that we got this first episode done and I got over my fear, sort of.
Mhm.
And very excited to now be doing this with one of my bestest friends.
Ditto. And now comes the fun part of editing.
Yeah, can't wait. But anyway, we would love to know everybody's thoughts. That this is basically just a big thing to open up a conversation with a bunch of other horror nerds or just nerds in general about the stuff we talk about. So I'm sure eventually we'll make like I don't know a Discord, a Facebook, something where everybody can kind of come together and talk about different stuff because this is just my opinions, my thoughts, my takeaways, and your takeaways if it's we talk about stuff that we both seen or vice versa. But I would love to discuss things with other spooky people. I guess is
Absolutely.
what I'm saying.
I think that's a good plan and gives us further insight into filmmakers and authors and stories.
I definitely agree. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Grim, for indulging me in babbling on for an hour about American Psycho and other stuff. And we will see you next time.
Excellent. See you guys.
Bye.